Welcome everyone, this is On Just Restart, and this time we're talking about a February 2022 Nintendo Direct. Now, what you may be noticing is that I'm on camera for an edited video. If you've been following me for a while, lately, I haven't been doing that. But this time, I don't know, I'm feeling it's a little different. Perhaps it's simply on a whim, perhaps it's simply my excitement for Pokemon Legends Arceus is coming out next week that's surprisingly looking to be perhaps better than a lot of people were expecting, or maybe it simply has to do with my increased level of anticipation for a February Direct that I think is going to be rather great, or it could be some combination of all three. I don't know. Regardless, I am excited for what's to come. I do not know what's to come, just for the record, but I am feeling pretty good about the likelihood of there being a major general February 2022 Nintendo Direct that will be talking about a number of exciting things for 2022 that's looking to be a fairly strong year for Nintendo on the Switch. So, that's what we're talking about today. Now, before we jump into things, let me first very quickly talk about my social media. You may see a few different things here on screen. You can check that all out. It is linked in the description below. And of course, if you like what you're seeing here, you can subscribe or maybe even consider joining as a member. To start things off, I think we need to talk about the likelihood of there being a Direct in February. Why is it likely for February as opposed to any other month? Well, let's take a look at the different years of the Switch. How has it sort of worked out? In 2017, there was the major January presentation, and then the Switch and Breath of the Wild came out March 3rd, so there was no Direct then. And then in 2018, there still was not a February Direct. There was instead a January Nintendo Direct Mini, and then in March we had a major Nintendo Direct. Then, in 2019, we finally got our first major February Nintendo Direct. And then in 2020, well, that was the pandemic year, so I feel like you kind of have to just throw it out the window. But we didn't get one then. We got a Animal Crossing Direct in February, and that was pretty much it in terms of Directs. However, we did get a March Direct Mini in March, so there was something around the early part of the year. But then in 2021, just last year, we got a February Nintendo Direct again. So then, looking at that history, what did that say? Some may argue, we don't know, it could happen in January, it could happen in February, it could happen in March. It's hard to say. And I would say there's absolutely some truth there. But also, I would say based off that, I would say it's most likely to expect a February Direct. Now again, I'm sure some of you may be scratching your heads, but we only got 2 February Directs. Why would it be the most likely? Let me explain. The reason being is that if you take a look at the Switch year, the Switch launch year I should say, it didn't make any sense for there to be a February Direct because, well, they needed to announce the Switch early on in the year, right after the holidays, because they didn't want to bastardize their holiday sales too much. But then, you know, they came out in March. That all made sense. So for sure, 2017, it makes sense why there wasn't one. 2018, though, they could have done that, but they didn't. Instead, they had a Direct Mini in January, and then a March Direct in March. So yeah, that makes sense. They had a mini Direct in the first month, and then a major Direct in the third month of the year. Okay. Then in 2019, they finally had one. 2020, you don't count that because of the pandemic year, and then 2021, they also had one. So why does that make me think that it makes sense for there to be a Direct in February? Because if you exclude the launch year, and you exclude the pandemic year, there are 3 years to consider here. 2 of them had a February Direct. The other one didn't, but there was a January Direct Mini. We are at the end of January pretty much. Pokemon Legends Arceus is coming out next week. The big focus on all of Nintendo's marketing and advertising and Pokemon Company and all of that is Legends Arceus, and I think it's warranted. But what that means is that there won't be any focus on other things, like with a big Direct for the rest of January. We're already pretty much at the end. It's not happening in January. There was no Direct Mini. And with there being no Direct Mini, there's nothing really to tide us over all the way until March for a March Direct. I think now, since there has not been a Direct Mini, there's more of a need to get a Direct out in February instead. That's why I think it makes sense for February at this point with the information we have. On top of that, there are games coming out in April and beyond that we do not know about yet. We need to get release dates fairly soon. Like, for example, Nintendo put out a trailer confirming a release date for Kirby and the Forgotten Land this month, in January, for its release in March, about 2 months beforehand, a little bit more than 2 months beforehand. They wanted somewhat of a window there, so as we approach February with no actual known April release dates, no official ones, there's going to be a need to make more announcements. Now you could argue, similar to Kirby, they could just put out more trailers, sure, but it depends on the game. For example, April, the early part of April, was rumored to be getting Advance Wars. We saw some eShop leaks and some online listings. It's likely a legitimate leak, I would say, and Advance Wars could very much come out in April. If that is the case, it makes more sense to talk about Advance Wars alongside its release date than a direct. Why? Because Advance Wars is smaller, more niche than even Kirby, and it's not going to really generate the same level of buzz on its own. It needs to be in a direct where other people are going to come to watch this direct for other reasons, and then they will then see Advance Wars as a result of that, and then know about it. It will get more publicity and spotlight in that way. So, yes, it makes sense to make announcements for things like Advance Wars in a February direct, assuming it's coming out this April. But even if it's not Advance Wars, surely Nintendo will have something at some point in April or May. It will be about time to make announcements for those games. So Nintendo's not going to go through both April and May without having anything. They're going to need to start making announcements fairly soon. Now, I'm sure some people are going to make the argument, though, that because we got the trailer for Kirby and the Forgotten Land, there's not really a need to talk about Kirby in February, so maybe we could wait until March for an actual direct. But I'll point this out. Last September, we weren't sure when we were going to be getting a September Nintendo Direct, but we expected it because we get a Nintendo Direct every September pretty much. So there was that, but people started to disbelieve it because, well, we had a Metroid Dread overview trailer at the beginning of September, and Metroid Dread was coming out in October. It was a major release at that point. People were starting to think with this big deluge of information for Metroid Dread and an overview trailer, it wouldn't be getting a major sort of direct segment, suggesting that there wouldn't be a major direct. But 2 weeks later, we still got our September Nintendo Direct, and that overview trailer was changed up a little bit, remixed with some different information, but was still basically a part of a Metroid Dread segment in the September Nintendo Direct. In other words, we've already seen a situation where a major Nintendo game gets a big trailer with new information on it, and then just a few weeks later, it's still showcased in a major direct. So I don't think the Kirby trailer really disproves a February Nintendo Direct. So with all that in mind, the need for announcements for April and beyond, the lack of a January Direct Mini, and the history of February being a good time to have a Direct, to me suggests that yes, a February Nintendo Direct is pretty darn likely. And I think there's going to be some pretty cool stuff to talk about during this Direct. We've already touched on Advance Wars. I think Advance Wars is pretty likely to be getting a release date then. Surely Kirby and Triangle Strategy, both games coming out in March, will be discussed during this Direct as well. I also think that if there's going to be some sort of DLC for Metroid Dread, I think they'll have some sort of announcement for that for the first half of the year. I don't think it's going to be paid DLC at this point. I think if it was going to be paid DLC, we would have already known about it. I think it's going to be a free DLC update, maybe perhaps some sort of nice challenge mode, something like that. And then in the second half of the year, we'll see an announcement maybe at E3 for Metroid Prime Remake instead. And that's how Nintendo's going to handle the Metroid goodness throughout the year. Free update for Dread the first half, Prime Remake second half. But Prime Remake won't be announced in this Direct. I think that's more of an E3 announcement. Going beyond Metroid though, I think it's a good time to talk about Zelda. What about Zelda? Well, there's been speculation that Breath of the Wild 2 could be seeing a delay. I disagree. Wholeheartedly even. I don't think that's the case. Breath of the Wild 2 has been a part of Nintendo's 2022 marketing for a while now. They waited a long time to even give us a release year for Breath of the Wild 2, in my opinion, because they didn't want to announce a delay. Not to mention that if this would really be the case, I think Nintendo would announce this delay separately before a February Nintendo Direct. Kind of like how they had the video announcing Breath of the Wild's delay back in 2015, I want to say, and also how they announced Metroid Prime's delay in January when it was getting restarted back in 2019, I want to say. So those kind of games like that, when they're going to be getting delays, Nintendo puts out some sort of presentation, and they would definitely do that before a major Nintendo Direct, like one that could happen this February. So no, I don't think that's going to be happening. I think Breath of the Wild 2 is a lock for this year, but then that raises the question, will we see it in this Direct? Well, if it's not a lock for this year, then it definitely won't be in the Direct. But Even if it is a lock for this year, there's a chance that Nintendo will just save it entirely for E3. However, I know the frame of mind that Nintendo shouldn't go through a February Direct without at least talking about it to some capacity. And considering the amount of times Nintendo has already done the thing where it's like, hey, look, development's going well, stay tuned, I think at this point what they're going to do is actually give us a tidbit of information. Not a massive amount, but something, a little tease, and say you'll be getting more information at E3. And they'll still show a 2022 release date. Basically, they're just going to reconfirm the game is not delayed, give us a little tease, and then let us know that E3 is when we're going to be getting the big blowout. But going beyond Breath of the Wild 2, what else could they be showing off for Zelda? There's been speculation about Twilight Princess or Wind Waker HD. Assuming Breath of the Wild 2 is not getting delayed, then I think these two games are going to be hard-pressed to make it out this year. But if they are going to make it out this year, then I think they would be announced in this February Direct and would come out basically when the first half of the year. If Breath of the Wild 2, though, is not going to make it out for 2022, then I actually think Nintendo would use games like these to tide us over. But because I don't think Breath of the Wild 2 is getting delayed, I think that is maybe not going to be happening. I think these games may be saved for another time, but in theory, they could still put them out if they are coming out early on in the year. And a February Direct would be the absolute correct time to announce that. Going beyond that, though, what else could we see? Well, a big one is Splatoon 3. Splatoon 3 is already confirmed for this year. We're pretty sure it's coming out, but the question is when. There's a history of Splatoon coming out in either May or June or July. July was Splatoon 2, May was Splatoon 1, and then June was the Octo expansion. So basically, this summertime is when Splatoon comes out, and considering that we are getting this major release in Kirby and the Forgotten Land for March, that opens up late April and May and June for another major Nintendo release. Then I think Splatoon 3, considering that and the history of its releases, would be primed for that window. So we could be seeing it as soon as this May, I think. And there's going to be a need to talk about it during this Direct, absolutely. In fact, I wouldn't be surprised if when Nintendo does announce the February Direct for, say, maybe the second week of February, they're going to put out a tweet saying, hey, tune in on such and such date and time for a massive 35-40 minute presentation or so focusing on spring 2022 releases, including Splatoon 3. I think that is definitely a possibility. Now, when I say spring, it may actually be summer, but you kind of get my point. First half of 2022 is basically what will be the focus here. And they'll also probably announce a test fire for Splatoon 3 to happen perhaps a month or two before its release date. So who knows, if Splatoon 3 is coming out this May, then maybe we get a test fire in April or March, for example, or you kind of get my point, somewhere in between there. So yes, I'm definitely thinking Splatoon 3 is going to have a big, huge focus here. But going beyond both Splatoon and Zelda, what else could we see in this Direct? Well, one option is Mario + Rabbids Sparks of Hope. There have been some rumors, though, that this game could be getting a delay. If that's the case, I would not expect to see it during this Direct, but if it's going to still be a this year kind of game, I'm thinking that this would be a good time to talk about it. They could save it for E3, it could come out, say, October time, but I really feel like a better time would for it to be to sort of come out maybe, say, late summer or early fall. In other words, August or September, similar to the release timings for the first one and its expansion. So I'm gonna guess that if the game is not getting delayed, it is coming out, or rather it's getting talked about in this February Direct. And if it is getting delayed, well, then it's gonna be a no-show. Another expected no-show is Bayonetta 3. Why? Not because it's getting delayed, but just because I think it's gonna be a second half of the year kind of game, and Nintendo's gonna really talk about it during E3. So it won't be in this Direct, in my opinion. Now, in terms of unannounced things, though, what else could we see? Well, I think one option is the rumored Fire Emblem. If there is a Fire Emblem game actually coming out this year, and according to rumor, basically in the first half, they absolutely need to talk about it during this Direct. I'm skeptical of this rumor because the rumor also suggests that there's another Fire Emblem coming out next year, or at least there's two major Fire Emblem games in development at the same time, one being a full-on new one being a remake. And while there could be multiple Fire Emblems in development, I don't know if they're going to be like a year apart from each other in terms of release timing here. So I'm a little skeptical of what may actually be going on here, but either way, Fire Emblem is likely to be coming out relatively soon. The last one came out in 2019, we are in 2022. You look at how the way 3DS handled Fire Emblem games, there were three major sort of sets of Fire Emblem games that came out during the 3DS era, I feel like there's got to at least be 2 different Fire Emblem games that came out during the Switch era, so there's a pretty decent chance we see Fire Emblem announced at some point this year, and perhaps sooner than later would make sense for this series. But it wouldn't entirely shock me if Fire Emblem is saved for next year and instead Nintendo focuses on another big sort of Japanese RPG series, and that would be Xenoblade Chronicles 3. Now, I feel like these games are a little interchangeable. I feel like one could come out this year and the other could come out the year afterwards. Either way, it's conceivable that both could come out this year, but there's already some pretty good stuff coming out this year, so I'm gonna kind of try and keep my expectations in check. But either way, the big rumor is that, yeah, Xenoblade Chronicles 3 has been developed for a while, supposedly. It's been ready or almost ready for a while already, and they wanted it to come out last year, but because of COVID and just polishing up and things, it just wasn't quite ready. So maybe it's coming out late this year, and if that's the case, I feel like a good appropriate time to announce it would be in this February Nintendo Direct. Conceivably, they could wait until E3, but with a big project like this, I think they're going to want to really spend some time advertising and marketing it throughout the year. So I'm thinking our best bet for a Xenoblade Chronicles 3 announcement would be in a February Direct now, assuming it's coming out this year. If it's not coming out this year, then for sure it's not going to be in this Direct in my opinion, and we'll see it perhaps in a later Direct at some point this year, because I think for sure it's coming out by 2023 at the latest. Going beyond all that, I think that that's kind of pretty much it in terms of major stuff. I mean, maybe we'll see a little bit more information on Monster Hunter Rise Sunbreak, but yeah, that's pretty much it for that. I think maybe we'll get some smaller things announced and things of that nature. There could be like another like surprise Nintendo announcement. There's always that possibility. I think it would be really nice for us to get some sort of sporty, racy game this year. The few that come to mind could be maybe F-Zero or Wave Race. Would be awesome if Nintendo would bring back one of those franchises. And if not, the next big sort of like logical leap for a racing game would be Mario Kart. And I know a lot of people are going to be kind of thinking about that because there's been a lot of rumors for that. But those rumors are suggesting maybe a tease this year, an announcement this year, not actually a release. There's so much games coming out this year, a major release like Mario Kart, I think would be saved for another year, potentially next year, alongside new hardware. Mario Kart Deluxe has already kind of done its damage on the Switch. I think perhaps we have to wait a little bit longer. So I wouldn't be expecting a Mario Kart announcement during this Direct, but, you know, anything is possible. Nintendo are the kings of curveballs here, so we shall see. But what do you guys think of a potential February Direct? Do you think it's happening? And if so, what kind of games do you think we could see during this presentation? Let me know in the comments below. Anyways, everyone, this is On Just Restart. Thank you so much for listening and watching, and I'll see you all really soon. Take care.